Effectiveness and Evolution panel we'll be having today. We actually have a great group of panelists for you who are people who are experts in the field and can certainly give you a really good view of where things are going in our market and how our market is evolving both in the region and internationally. So we're going to kick off with some short presentations which are going to show you more about the state of the various aspects of what digital marketing is about today. My name is Alex Karageorgis. I'm the Managing Director of Think Digital, and I'll be your host today. Once the brief presentations conclude, we're going to have a few questions to the panelists, and after that, perhaps even have a couple of questions from you guys if you're interested in asking something to our panelists. So the first in order is David Doughty, who's come here from the United States. He's the Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for the IAB in the US. So David, would you like to take the floor and run us through?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. I was here yesterday for the opening of I don't know if you were in the other room and got to see the Irish comedian. He was very funny, and he taught me that everybody in Ireland is named Sean or Mary. But I am David Doughty, as Alex has said, so I have neither of those names. And I'd like to talk to you a bit about what we think about native advertising at IAB. One of my responsibilities beyond the sort of just the marketing stuff, and I work with Alexandra, who's here with me, Alexandra Solomon, on all of our international efforts. There are 42 IABs around the world, and one of the ones we're most fond of is IAB Romania, which is why we're here. You know, in 2013, I assume the same thing is happening here. Native advertising became not just a buzzword, but it arrived on the scene as if it were shot out of a cannon. And what we found was that this excitement, this almost circus atmosphere of it, this general sort of sense of, my God, this is the most exciting thing ever, was that everybody was talking about native advertising in different ways. Everybody meant something different about it. It was like a Tower of Babel. And we said, wow, we need to begin to talk to it in such a way that we agree on what we're saying when we're saying native advertising. Or maybe we don't, but it would really be helpful for the industry if we did. So we brought about 100 people together in the US from a variety of different places. And we said, you know, let's reach common decisions. And these are some of the people who participated in this task force that we put together. And we said, what do you think native advertising is? And can we come to a common agreement, not only on what the term means, but on what the products that are, what the ad products that are out there are actually, what they share in common and what their goals are. You know, you see up here Facebook, Twitter, I believe that's my memory. There's Facebook, there's Twitter. But we also have someone up there called Condé Nast, whom I'm sure you're familiar with, a great international publisher, traditional publisher. And just recently, last week, as I was looking to come here and thinking about, gee, what are people talking about? Condé Nast put out a 4,000-word definition of what its native advertising was going to be like, and it included things like their legalistic terms, as well as their view of how privacy would be protected. Well, that's really interesting. It takes one company, 4,000 words, to talk about this new, great, exciting piece of our industry. Yes, it does. So that'll just tell you we haven't got all the answers yet. But what we did do was come up with this conclusion, that native advertising can have a bright future if we sort of look at it in this way, across the right-hand side. Here's the bright future. It can break us out of advertising, out of the ad ghetto, being on the sides of the pages, being outside the user's experience. And the second thing that it can do once it brings us outside the ad ghetto is bring native advertising, can bring advertising into the stream of the user. That's a very important piece of what's happening. It's actually kind of like a growing up of interactive advertising. You know from your experiences on television, your experiences in print, that When you are watching television, there are mini stories within the larger stories, and those mini stories are called commercials. When you're going through a magazine and you're paging through an ad spread, you're actually having the ad be in your user stream, being the same thing that you expect when you're reading a magazine. That's what's going to happen with native, we believe, in interactive advertising. Standard banners, as you know, have basically become just performance advertising. So that's the other opportunity here, is that you can have in native advertising a much richer brand experience for brands and agencies than you can have in traditional banners. So we also noted something else during the IB task force discussions. We said it would fail, however. These are the positives. The next slide will show us the potential challenges, and that is quality has to be high, because if we don't have high quality, we will have fatigue once again. It'll be the same thing as banner blindness that now exists in many experiences of advertising. We want to be sure that what we don't have with native is native blindness. We want to be sure that we don't lead to ad avoidance. We want to be sure that we engage the audience in such a new and different way that consumers will feel that this is great creative and that they will not avoid these ads. We want to be transparent. We want to be honest, basically, is what it comes down to. We want to tell people this is sponsored content in some way or another, and we all have to figure out how to do that if we're publishers or we're advertisers. We have to find a way to be clear about who we are and what we're trying to do in that environment. We also don't want to lead to social fatigue. We see that as a potential problem. There are so many native ad formats being driven in in your Facebook stream and Twitter. You're familiar with them, I'm sure. That could lead to a certain fatigue in the social domain, because that's where it's happening so strongly, native advertising. So what can we do about that? We have to watch for that. And then, of course, scale. We were talking about that earlier with some folks when we were sitting down before we came in the room. One thing that's really important to agencies is being able to have scale. Well, what does native advertising, can it touch on scale, or is it as opposed to scale? And some people believe right now that that native advertising doesn't provide scale, but I don't know that that's true. I think it's a challenge that we're going to have to face. Some people believe that you can actually deliver native advertising at scale and programmatically. We will see over the next year if that's true. Some people believe that no, those are contradictions in terms. So what we did with all of these conversations that are going on is we created the Native Advertising Playbook, which you can find on IAB.net. I won't go through it in any great detail, but it basically sort of sums up all of what I'm telling you here. And one of the most important points that it reaches is that there's an aspiration and then there are ad products. That's what we mostly concluded. That native advertising as it exists now, we don't all have a common definition, but we all have a common aspiration for it. And there are, in fact, 6 major ad products. So here's the native aspiration that we agreed on. Getting 100 people to agree on a few words might seem easy, but as you know, from just trying to find the right place to have dinner with 5 people, it isn't easy. This is what we agreed to. Is that native, the aspiration for native is that it should be a paid ad that is so cohesive with the page content, assimilated with the design, and consistent with the user experience that the viewer simply feels that it belongs. That's the aspiration for native advertising. Here are the 6 most common types of ad products that we are actually observing. There's in-feed ads that I'm sure you're all familiar with. There's custom ads, which are sort of a traditional part of advertising. There are the in-ad IAB standard units there in the upper right. Search units, which, long time ago, we were having this discussion too, a long time ago you could think of search as the original native. Recommended content units, and promoted listing units. Those are all things that you're basically familiar with or soon will be familiar with, because we are seeing them as actually happening most frequently. We also looked at some of the 5 key characteristics of effective native ads. So how we looked at them was across a continuum. On your far right-hand side, that's mostly not native. On the far left-hand side, you have you're getting closer, or you have the perfect native, if you will, if there is such a thing. And down the left-hand side, you have form and in-stream. Is it in-stream? Does it fit into the overall page design? Function. How consistent is the ad with the page content experience? If it's very consistent, it's more native than not. Integration. Does the ad behave in a way that is integral to the page, providing a seamless user experience so that the user doesn't say, well, this ad is different from the rest of the page, or this message, this content is different from the rest of the page. Buying and targeting. So is it narrowly targeted, which would be more native, or is it more broadly targeted run of the network, which is potentially a scale issue? And finally, measurement. How do you measure these ads? And are marketers more likely to think about things like views and shares, which are higher up in the marketing funnel, or are they going to think about sales and downloads, which is lower down in the funnel? So, you know, we believe, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with the viewable impression standards that we've just released in the United States in agreement with agencies and marketers. Do you have them here too in Romania? If you could raise a hand or two. Yes, you do? Okay, so you're familiar. So that is actually something that's going to allow us to get closer to measuring time spent in people's engagements. The actual standard itself is a minimum, but people, like I know Group M is very interested in this, is raising this standard, not just as here's the minimum, yeah, but what I'm expecting is a lot more. And so that is where the negotiation can take place once you have a standard. And so it will become an important measure for engagement for the brand. So clearly, we're at the earliest stages of a very exciting future. It's a new and effective, we believe, form of digital advertising. And as with any early stage venture, there's a lot to be discovered, and we'll have a lot of discussion about it right here, right now. So thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
David, thank you very much. It's really interesting to see that there's a lot of work going on in the background for the conversations that we're having in our markets. I mean, the scale of the work you're doing is very impressive with the IAB, so thank you for that. So second to come up to the stage is Anke Quick. She comes here today from the Netherlands. I think there's also a football game today, so we're going to not miss that, or rooting for the Netherlands. So Anke is Director of Audience of Demand for EMEA and Vivaki, and she's going to talk to us a bit more about the programmatic part of the discussions we've been having. So Anke.
Thank you. So hi everyone. I'm looking at my watch because we have been asked to really respect the time, which is I think around 7 minutes. So I quickly would like to give a short introduction of myself and what I do. And after that I would like to talk a bit about programmatic and then around two things. So one thing about that programmatic is not the same as automation. And then I would like to touch quickly upon the fact that a different way of buying also requires a different way of planning. Okay, so I work for Vivaki AOD in Amsterdam. AOD, or Audience in Demand, is basically the programmatic solution of the Publishers Group. So we service the agencies of Publishers Group like Starcom and Zenith. Yeah, we are doing a lot of work with big advertisers across different verticals. And we do this programmatically across a lot of different areas. So what we do in Amsterdam is mainly focused on display at the moment, and that's where it started. But we are also running a lot of video campaigns. We're doing mobile. We are doing social as well. And I do believe that in the future, all digital channels will actually be bought in a programmatic way. So then we talk about television. We talk about radio, which actually already started in some countries, and also digital out of home. So I work for the AOD Activation Center in Amsterdam. This basically has been created to centralize all programmatic buying in Europe. And really to kind of quickly scale and quickly activate different markets across Europe, across EMEA. So at the moment we are running activity for 12 markets. Do that with a team of 11 people. We have a very international team, I believe 7 different nationalities, speaking 7 different languages. And we are 100% focused on the implementation and optimization of programmatic buying campaigns. And so we're really building a center of excellence around programmatic buying across the different channels. I quickly wanted to talk about the key points of this differentiation of AOD, because I think it's important for the discussion. So how AOD compares with some other providers is that we find transparency extremely important. So it's very important for advertisers to know where their ad appears, to know what kind of targeting is being used. And yeah, we believe that transparency is very important and should always be shared. Then we are 100% programmatic. So we don't buy media upfront. We buy everything based on performance in real time. Then scale and reach is very important. Brand safety is obviously a topic that comes up very often. And we have a Viveki verified process where we basically kind of judge all the technologies and partners that we work together with to make sure that ads of brands appear in brand safe environments. Then technology, so we partner with different technologies, are agnostic, but also are building our own technology to make best use of the data. And then the last point, in terms of data policy, because this is also really important and a lot of advertisers are not really always aware of, is that we will never share any data between advertisers, across advertisers basically, under any circumstances. Okay, so then quickly a few points about programmatic. So programmatic is not the same as automation. I've actually heard this a lot and read this a lot over the last year. So a lot of people actually think programmatic is just about putting inventory into a platform and then buying it in an automated way, and it's just a lot of efficiency and that's it. But that's not really true. I think it's still discussions are still really needed. Relationships are still very important. We actually work very closely together with different publishers and discuss a lot around what is working, what is not working. So the relationships and the talking is still very important. And next to that, there are a lot more benefits of programmatic besides the automation. And the first one, I believe, is consolidation. So what we do with programmatic is buying media through one technology platform. And this enables really to connect all the different media. So this can be media between different partners, but it can also across different channels, across different devices. The technology really enables to connect this much better, which is very important because, so first of all, because of the relevancy. So by having like all media and all data in one platform, you are able to kind of create a much more relevant experience for the consumer. And I believe this is something that often is not being used enough yet, and a lot of advertisers are not really aware of this yet. So for example, I think traditional media buying is very much based on kind of planning and buying based on assumptions or based on kind of thinking where your audience is. But in our technology platforms, we can actually see lots of different data points and use that for to make the messaging much more relevant. So an example is maybe we can see a weather feed, and when you are a retailer, you can actually, when the sun is shining, maybe focus your messaging on products around barbecues, whereas when it's raining, maybe you want to emphasize your messaging around rain clothing. And these are all very simple examples, But there's so much data available, and there's so much that can be done with that in terms of the messaging and in terms of connecting everything, that I think everybody should think much more creative about. And then the last point is, yes, programmatic is also about efficiency. So first of all, it's about efficiency because everything is being bought through one platform. So you are very, very well able to see which audiences are already reached, which are not reached, and you can use that information for your messaging again. And then, of course, the automation part also is efficiency. So by putting the media buying through the technology, you can buy more efficient, but it's just a part of the whole story. There are much more benefits to it. And then the last part, so programmatic media buying, I see it very much as a evolvement of media buying. It's not one or the other, and it brings really a lot of opportunities. But to get the best out of these opportunities, you also need to change the way media is planned. And this is basically meant for advertisers and agencies. But first of all, it's very important to start with the right KPIs. So it's not only about low CPM. A lot of people think programmatic is about cheap inventory, it's about bringing the CPMs down. But it's not like digital. There's enables actually to measure a lot, and we should use this to optimize our campaigns as well, and not just think about low CPMs. We should accept no mysteries. So advertisers always should ask for transparency in terms of where the ads appear, but also in terms of what is working, what is not, what kind of targeting strategies are being used. Then the third point, optimize in real time. So don't plan with too many restrictions based on assumptions, but really see what is working in real time, and yeah, make sure that you optimize towards that, so that you get the best out of the campaign. And then the last part is test, test, and test. So programmatic buying enables to test a lot in real time. And people should not be afraid to test and to try new things. And really, I think, start today and build the learnings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anke. So I think test, test, test is the most important thing. We need to, as a market, have knowledge of how things work. And if we don't try them out, we will never actually learn. So do actually invest time in trying things. Our third presenter and panelist is Jean-Paul Edwards. He's the Director for Strategy and Product for OMD. And he's a guy with all the secrets. He knows all the things which are coming in the future. He's not telling us any of those today, unfortunately. But Jean-Paul, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the invitation to come here. I'm Jean-Paul, Strategy and Product Development Director for OMD EMEA. Essentially, it's my job to understand what's coming, what the future challenges are, and the future opportunities are for us as a business and also our clients. As I say, I can't go into too much detail on the specific product developments, but I'd like to share with you some of the concepts and some of the ideas that are guiding our thinking and have relevance to the debates around native and programmatic and how we see those things shaping up for the future. So I'd like to take a little step back. I've been doing futurology for about 17 years now, so it's been a long time of looking at this. And one of the most important and useful techniques for understanding where things are going is to take a step and look back and see current developments within the space and within the context of longer term developments. So essentially the core point I'd like to share with you today is that the things that will be changing pretty much post next year and through the second half of this decade is that we're entering the third age of the web. We've had two ages of the web so far. I'm sure you're very familiar with the concept of Web 2.0, but there's also, of course, Web 1.0. Web 1.0 was the web of documents. Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web in 1990 in Switzerland, and pretty much through the mid-1990s, the late 1990s, the consumer internet, the consumer World Wide Web was born. And I'm sure all of your very early experiences with the web were kind of similar in the sense of, this is amazing, we can find all this great new stuff, and then very quickly you found there's too much stuff. When you type a search into a search engine, there were too many answers. There was not enough relevancy there. And it's very much the people who solved those problems were the people who understood the principles of the next stage of the web. The next stage of the web was the web of people, Web 2.0. So Google utilized concepts like PageRank, which is based on the idea that it's people who create websites, it's people who have expertise in certain areas, it's their links to other sites that defines whether something is good or bad or not. And they very much won out in that business. And on top of that, through an advertising perspective and through more targeted, more relevant search advertising, they built a $50, $60 billion a year business on top of that. So it's no mean feat. Fast forward a few years to kind of the mid-2000s, and we see the birth of Web 2.0, the social web, the web of people. And very much a similar story. The early players in that environment, the Friendsters, the MySpaces, the Friends Reunited in the UK, they also connected lots of people together. But soon there was too much stuff. There was too much irrelevant content. It was the brands that understood the third age of the web that really won out in that second age. They utilized data in a very clever way, be that the Facebook EdgeRank algorithm, or how Twitter used cards, or Google Now, Google also winning out, and Amazon in terms of their curation of products. They won out in the second age of the web. So as we're starting to enter the third age of the web, and it's not really been born yet, Siri, Google Now are early technologies in this revolution, but things are moving very, very quickly. Things are getting a lot more semantically enabled, and the services we're utilizing are becoming ever more advanced. How we think about the third age of the web needs to be defined by what's the fourth age of the web, what's coming, what's post 2020, and that is an open question. But the way we're thinking about it is that the fourth age of the web is the web of value. Essentially, all economic activity around the world happens through digital networks. You can maybe think of bitcoins as being a very, very early stage technology in the web of value, but the likes of Uber, revolutionizing the taxi industry around Europe, and upsetting a lot of black cab drivers in London and other markets. Starting to see how value is being created and being distributed through these new kinds of technologies. So if the fourth age of the web is the web of value, the key question we need to think about now is how do we utilize the web of value to win in the web of data? And I think that's really, what can start to unite the concepts of native advertising, programmatic, content distribution, many of the themes that we are working with today. So we very much believe that it's focusing on value creation, value for brands, value for consumers, value for publishers, is really the key way to think about these things, and to connect data across many different domains in very creative ways. And the fact is we're starting to see some interesting signs. This is a personal favourite of mine. It's a women's clothing site, so I'm not a great user of it, but my wife's very keen on this site. It's called Dressipi. So it's a UK-based fashion retailer, and it uses some amazing semantic technologies to really drive a wiser, more informed purchase. So you can put your own measurements in, you can put your favourite colours in, you can photograph your favourite clothes, it'll understand what they are and make recommendations on new fashion lines out there. They've got a great feature called Reveal and Conceal, so they can make your arms look long or make your bum look small. There's all sorts of interesting new ways of thinking about fashion retail that exist on this site. But those concepts, that concept of using technology to drive the service, I think are very much applicable to advertising. So we are very much starting to think of advertising as a service layer, a layer that consumers find useful. It's part of the service. It's just the service going beyond the site and being distributed in other contexts. So we can think about those new kinds of contexts. That kind of defines, from our point of view, native advertising. We'd like to think of native advertising not so much as a noun, as a thing, but more as an adjective, a way of describing things. Things can be more or less native, as David said earlier on. The way I like to think about it is that native advertising, there's two definitions. One's a bit wordy, one's a lot more simple. Native advertising is any communications technique that is aligned with the consumer's expectation of the site user experience. Or to put it more simply, be the thing they came here for. As David said, search, I think, is the original form of native advertising. When we're searching for products, the advertisers are competing to put those products in front of us and be the most relevant message for us and be the most relevant solution to that idea. And we'll start to see these ideas developing over the next few years with more advanced semantic technologies. So already there's some interesting formats being placed in Google Now, whereby your current kind of purchase histories and things you're looking for can be linked to supply databases from different retailers, and actually the things you're looking for your family for Christmas, it can tell you when those things are in stock in nearby retailers. There's all sorts of really useful services that help you kind of live your life. From another perspective, looking at same brand, but they as an advertiser, an interesting thing we did in London last year was actually buying digital out-of-home screens and then using Google Now to populate those digital out-of-home screens with live, pertinent, relevant content. You can see information about the London Eye next to the London Eye, but also the fact that it's going to rain in 10 minutes. Useful information that just distributes the concept of the product to people in different kinds of contexts. Or another example, in terms of content marketing rather than native, is extending advertising ideas into new formats and into new kinds of interactions. So a retailer we work with in the UK called John Lewis, a high-end department store, have had many years of working using emotional advertising at Christmas. So much so that those Christmas ads are kind of the thing that's looked out for each year by the national newspapers. This year's ad was all about a cute story between a bear and a hare, very much targeting parents of younger children. And we understood that an emerging behaviour was parents were reading to their children using iPads. So we created a free, high-end children's book that had all sorts of games in it and could be read and told the story of the bear and the hare. Minimal branding. We didn't want to cross that line, but everyone knew who provided it because it was a famous ad. So much so that my 3-year-old daughter was still requesting this in March. I had to actually delete the app from my iPad because it was driving me mad because I'd read it about 100 times by this point. But all these ideas, I think, illustrate how we can think creatively about communications and put our messages into new kinds of context. And this, I think, links very much to the world of programmatic. Anka's made some great points around programmatic, so I don't want to repeat those. As she says, programmatic is not just automation. We say that programmatic is a necessary layer. We've been building around the world for the last 5-10 years a really solid technology layer that enables us to trade things automatically. Now that is here, we need to shift our focus, especially on the publisher and agency side. We can't just think programmatically. That facilitates the trade of inventory, but actually it doesn't value media from a publisher's perspective, and it doesn't value or place media from an advertiser's perspective. We need to think algorithmically. So programmatic relates to automation, algorithmic relates to computation. You're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to figure out what price is this person with these data points worth. And therefore, we need to build creative algorithms that leverage the data that we have and also the insight we have about emerging consumer behavior, the insight we have about what makes brands different from each other, and then create targeting and messaging algorithms that are based upon that kind of thing. And the fact is, we can't do this automatically. There are now so many data points. We're tracking about 120 different kinds of data points, and there's new ones coming through all the time. And that basically means that there's about 10 to the 100 different options. That's a Google, not a Google. A Google is 10 to the 100. It would take more than the lifetime of the universe for even the fastest computer in the world to work out the optimum solution. So we need people to think creatively about how those things work. So really, just to conclude my kind of thoughts on this, is that really, as we look forward through the latter part of this decade, when you think about how brands need to focus on value creation around this kind of new third age of the web, and that technology and data are a necessary requirement to do this. But we also need to think about human creativity, human guile, human cunning, because the optimum algorithms will be changing all the time, and we need to connect those different skill sets together in a far more efficient way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. Our fourth and last presenter for just before the panel is Michael Messerschmidt. He's Interaction Director for CEE. and he's going to be sharing his thoughts and his company's thoughts about today's topic.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the previous presentations. Just let me fix this one. Yeah, that's the way it works. Fantastic. First of all, I really like to mention about great conference, great speakers, great audience. It's really nice being here. It's an honor. I know that the ICE Fest is one of the most relevant conferences across Central and Eastern Europe. Great content is something I mentioned, and there is actually few things lingering around here, a few buzzwords that we've been asked to make a statement for. First thing is native marketing, and the second thing is then obviously programmatic buying. Native marketing. For us in Group M, it's important to look at the scale of things, and we're not pretty much interested in like producing content and doing all these things. We have a very economic way of looking at those things. We recently, I think it was in January, acquired a company which is pretty much focusing on native marketing. A company is called Plister, is roughly 100 people size in Berlin. So we deeply believe that this stuff has a future. But for me personally, that is a question of integration. I think native marketing is much more a question for our agencies, meaning for Mediacom, for Mindshare, MEC or Maxis, and less a question for us in Group M. It will be relevant, it's a very interesting channel, but it's a question of integration. Second thing for us, looking at scale, looking at the economic side of the business, is programmatic. Much more interesting. Do we think the impact of this will be big? Yes, it will be big. And I would just provide one, because we've been asked for the 5 minutes, so I really like to keep my presentation short here. And I'd just like to provide you with one perspective of that, why the impact's going to be big and what we probably need to work on. And if we're looking back 5 years, what we have done in marketing and what we've done in digital, like the entire value, if it was about display, the entire value of a placement was coming out of the placement, right? So we just could book things, and that was the entire value. That was a piece of money out of a budget that was going directly to the publisher. Now in the programmatic world, this is pretty much changing, because we're adding 2 new layers, which is data and technology. And now we, at least the people that are working in the agency, know that our clients don't like to pay more for things over time. So keeping the prices stable and that, adding 2 new layers, obviously the value of the placement, the value of an impression, significantly decreased. And the value of data and the value of technology increased. And we all need to squeeze this into the pricings that our clients like to pay. So now publishers complaining a lot why prices for inventory are decreasing. That might be one of the reasons for this, right? So when we're looking at markets, and I'm looking at 5 or 6 markets actually, we need to question, is there the right business model in place yet? Do publishing companies have the right business models? Once again, inventory prices are decreasing, and none of the publishing companies that I'm talking to has really a sustainable business model in data. So I can just encourage everyone on the publishing side here to develop a business model in data. We as agencies would be pretty much open to talk about this, because I truly believe that over time, the publishing companies will need that revenue that's coming out of data to maintain their businesses. Otherwise, it will just be decreasing on the insertion. So the outlook of this is, well, there is not that much outlook in native advertising. I think everyone accepted that it's there, so we just need to integrate that, and I'm sure agencies are working on that. Programmatic over time, and we've heard also a lot of operational perspective on this. Programmatic over time has a massive impact on our business. And we can just, once again, encourage everyone to set right business models, to set right technologies, and specifically thinking about data and how we monetize this. Oops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Short and sweet and to the point. Indeed. All right, so shall we please come up to the table? We are being joined also by Mr. Zoltan Zigeti, who is the president of the group in Romania, and he's going to give us the local view on all these things that we're talking about. Yeah, there's enough chairs. I'm standing. I don't do the sitting well. Yes, please. Can you? So, thank you for sharing your thoughts. It's great to see that you're all fairly aligned in the way that you see the industry, which means we're all on the same page, which is great. Means we can move forward. Especially like the positioning about the publishing side and its responsibilities to our market. So that's something that we perhaps could talk more about during the panel. So I'd just like to kick off with a question, and this, going to the first part and David's presentation about native. When you have your conversations with your clients, with your partners, publishers or advertisers alike, what is the kind of feedback that you're getting? Are they looking to this as a strategic way of doing business, or is it something that they do with certain agencies? What's your feedback? And feel free to grab a mic and answer the question.
I'm happy to begin, not from the point of view of an agency or marketer, but certainly strategically is how we believe native should be looked at, because I think I touched on this a bit when I was talking. It really is interactive advertising growing up in going through the same changes that other media have gone through. So I remember television in the days when, I don't really. There would be an announcer who would, cover his ear and have a microphone and would come in the middle of a TV show and be there for 15 seconds and just deliver some message as this seated voice. And that's sort of what we've been doing in interactive. And then over time, the television commercial emerged to be more like a story, like the rest of television. So I think thinking of this as a strategic shift is a really important thing to be doing.
I suppose in our conversations with clients over the last couple of years, speaking about native, I think they're less interested in what native is and more what it can do. So less native is not the question so much, it is more the answer. So they are concerned with how can they get their content out there, how can they be more relevant to customers, how can their ads be avoided less, those kinds of questions to which a more native approach is the answer. And therefore, and then also just illustrating the fact there's a huge variety of really interesting, really creative ways that people are coming up with based on utilising personal data and mashups with Spotify and all these kind of things that allows them to think far more creatively and gives them permission to do a lot more than just think about buying some space and putting a sales message within that space.
So creativity, and I believe you said measurement to an extent. Are those the two things that you're trying to work on in terms of native?
Measurement is also, of course, is a given, and the fact that these things fit within advertising formats also means that measurement is generally embedded within there. That some kind of, pure content techniques are less able to do. So it's then actually how this kind of stuff then ties into the Acuins and the other programmatic platforms out there, so that we can target people who've consumed that content differently to people who haven't consumed that content. We know people are primed; they are aware of certain ideas.
Thank you.
To comment from our side, I think for us it was important to integrate some business models on native advertising into our entire offer. So I think that was the reason why we acquired Plista. They have a very technical way of scaling native advertising, but a very specific way. So from our side, and well, I'm not talking about that much, producing or integrating that content, like really give it scale and leverage it into our agencies. For Group M, I think it's interesting to speak about that, or to be interested in about that once we have a technique behind this to scale it. So I think on the agency side, we just need to accept that native marketing is there. We need to know our day-to-day stuff, need to know how to deal with that. And we, on our layer, will give it a business model.
Thank you. Zoltan, do you want to give us a view on the local market, how things are playing out here?
Yeah, native advertising, it is present in Romania. A lot of clients are using it, agencies are using it. Usually it's adding value to the local publishers because they can sell better their space. Yesterday night I was looking where I can watch the football match live somewhere and to have a beer, and I was going to going out site, metropotam.ro, and the first article was you can watch on the following terraces, and the first one was Promenada. And after, in the middle of the article, I was realizing actually that this is native advertising. So it was a description of the place, it was a description of everything. So yeah, clients are using it. And usually agencies are working together with the publisher to do it. And this cooperation is really the best for integrating and making relevant the content to the consumer. Thank you.
Now, let me just jump slowly onto programmatic, which will become obviously a part of the conversation for native over time as well. So recently, P&G has, shown or spoken about its plans and how it intends to invest its budgets. It's fairly large budgets, in fact. And it's talking about more than 70% of its budget actually being invested programmatically in the ecosystem. So how do you think this is going to affect the way we do business, and what kind of value do we need to bring in order to help the advertisers invest the money more wisely?
So yeah, I think technology and data are becoming more and more important. So programmatic is becoming more and more important, and we see more budgets shifting to programmatic in general. If we go back to native, the previous topic, I don't think we are there yet in Europe in terms of programmatic and native. In the US, we are actually just starting with programmatic native, but I think we need a lot more standardization to really make it meaningful in Europe. But since programmatic is not only about automation, but mainly about data and kind of connecting all the different buys, I definitely think that native will become part of programmatic as well. Because we will be able to connect native maybe with display or video or social advertising, and kind of instead of thinking about different channels and different devices, we can think more about the audience, and we can really see what have audience seen, what have they interacted with, and use that to kind of execute the rest of our media. So yes, I think programmatic will be growing and will becoming more and more important, mainly because of the data part and the relevant experience that we actually can deliver to the consumer.
What is the agency's role in this? I mean, if P&G is planning on doing it in-house, how can we add value to the clients who are also considering the same kind of direction?
Yeah, so programmatic wouldn't, well, I think in some countries it's still relatively new. So a specialism around programmatic is extremely important. I think this is like an agency environment kind of has really the capabilities to develop this specialism and to kind of constantly being on top of all the changes. So it is very important to have specialists around that share their knowledge across different advertisers. And the second of all, obviously the main role of an agency is the expertise across all the different media and communications planning. And because this connecting of the different channels is becoming more and more important, I definitely think that the agency will still play a very important role in that.
Can I? Well, thank you. That was an interesting question, by the way. 75%, that sounds huge. I don't know why everyone is really surprised about that. Probably 95% of all display budgets over time will be programmatic.
I think they're more scared by the number rather than
so 75% is pretty much a low number because there was no timeline behind that. I mean, it's always nice, and first of all, luckily for us agencies, we see only very few clients that can build their own kind of trading. Because we know what's the investment in technology and data, and there's only very few clients that can do this on our own. Secondly, we know that programmatic is coming. It's a very effective way of buying media. It's a very effective way of using data. So I would wonder if that stops one day at 75%. That might not be 2015, 16, but one day we definitely will be there, and then 75% will be a very low number, right? So now we need to understand how we can implement this in which market. So it's always nice if I have a target on some percentage that I spent through a channel. But I also need to understand, is that possible to do this or not without wasting budget? if we would took an entire big client budget today and spent 75% of it programmatic, he would probably buy a lot of very low quality inventory, to be political correct, right? So we need to see what is available and how can we scale this. I think all the agency groups are interested in scaling programmatic because it's a very efficient way, right? And that's pretty much the thing. So I think 75% over time will be the average percentage of buying programmatic.
Thanks.
I just wanted to add, I guess, 2 points. I briefly sat in the programmatic seminar earlier this morning, and the question came up of why shouldn't agencies build their own technology rather than using an AppNexus or similar platform. I'd say it's the same argument, that there's some programmatic technologies which are probably best built by providers globally. That layer is done by them, but in my language, the algorithmic layer, the proprietary use of data and techniques and creativity, just as with media planning, is best done by people who have a broad perspective, who work across a number of clients, who are tracking consumer trends across multiple markets, across multiple sectors. You end up with a recessive gene pool, in a sense, if you're just focused on one area for the rest of your career. So it may be work in the short term, but I think less effective in the long term. And the second point is that there's still, in terms of I'd agree very much with Lev in terms of the direction, there's still some elements of, TV is still the big unknown question. And we really don't know how effective addressable TV is yet. I firmly believe it will be very effective, but we're just starting to get the data coming in. So we have the AdSmart initiative run by Sky in the UK with addressable advertising. That is working within some quite small confines at the moment, but there's some very interesting signals that are coming out of that. And this time next year, we'll have a far better, more confident picture of the time frame of the developments that David's describing.
What I think is interesting about what you're saying is, I was just thinking about that. The 75% is going to be a low number, but when television comes in, you're going to have to watch that vector go up, right, in television. So it's interesting that interactive advertising is sort of what, at least from my point of view, growing up and becoming more native to the actual content experience, relevant in a different way than it has been in the past, both like being actually in the stream. So it is becoming more like television, and television is becoming more like digital. As we come together as a one big media platform, it will all be digital, and both sides are going to go in various ways toward the top of that pyramid is what I think is happening here.
Any views on how Romania stands in this?
The fact that we are staying here in Bucharest and talking about it, it's very clear that we are following the international trend. You guys are launching programmatic somewhere this autumn. Already there are other platforms which are in test right now. We definitely have to talk with clients, explain not only to clients but to publisher what is in their best advantage, and for sure it's a delay of 3 to 6 months until Romania is up and running.
2015 is the year of programmatic for Romania.
Yeah, of course.
Excellent. Okay, so you very interestingly mentioned TV, and I think that could be an interesting way to close perhaps our conversation today and talk a bit more about the future and how we see digital evolving and how all touch points for the client, all devices, so the tablets, the TV, your mobile, all become a way to talk to the consumer. So just like the web changed from documents to people, I think advertising is evolving as well at the same time from a media to talking to people a lot faster, and this is what the cross-device capability allows. So what are your views on how the evolution of linear TV to video on demand and audience targeting, if you like, how fast is it going to move, and what are the initial signals perhaps you're getting from the various markets?
Yeah, it's something we kind of try to take this complicated trend and try and drill it down to 3 steps in terms of that evolution, because essentially we very much understand that no brand is going to suddenly turn off the TV tap and do things in a brand new way instantly. So it's how do you take small steps towards that ultimate goal. So the 3 steps are roughly as follows, that firstly you think about AV rather than TV. So think about your TV message, but can it reach audiences in a broadcast kind of time frame, a broadcast perspective, more efficiently. So it's splitting budgets across that level. And generally for younger audiences, you get a pretty interesting number coming out. And once you get an interesting number, double figures plus, then you can start to justify doing different kinds of things, not just create that one 30-second ad. Let's create 5 different edits of it. Let's make it a little bit interactive. Let's make it likable. Let's do various things with it. And then new forms of value are created out of that. And then that's where some of the leading edge brands are at the moment. And then the final stage is just to think of TV as being big screen digital, where it's just a type of screen that you're utilizing. TV's big screen, we've got medium-sized screens, and the mobile is the small personal screen. We're utilizing those in a far more integrated fashion within the same data sets.
I definitely think so as well. I mean, if we think that there is still some kind of multi-screen usage, or that the contest on the final device, meaning like the TV, has already started. When we're looking at the new smart TVs that are on the market, or LG, you can actually either watch TV, you can watch YouTube, you do a game. Like there is the contest or the competition on the screen is actually on your device already. And that is interesting, because in the past we thought, good, people are not watching probably commercials in TV, so they do something in the internet. Actually, they might just switch off TV for 5 minutes, doing something on YouTube, not switch back on TV. So they're not even recognizing the TV ads in the background anymore. We need to see where that is growing. We need to see how that will be accepted. I think then it's definitely for us interesting to see how addressable are TVs in terms of advertising, probably in normal ad breaks. So meaning, how can we reach TV sets in normal ad breaks where it's like probably the same advertising? That might annoy a bit, but that will be probably one of the questions. So I think the contest about the TV is definitely on to do various things. So TVs are much more computers with a big screen. And I think that more and more internet content, not digital content, but like YouTube and all this stuff, will definitely win over normal TV program.
Yeah, so I also think the more and more TV is becoming digital, sorry, I'm going to give my programmatic view again, but the more important programmatic will become as well. And again, just because of the different data that is available through technology platforms that should be and can be used much more in television in the future as well. But we are not there yet again. I think at agencies like television departments and digital departments are very separated still. And that are 2 very different disciplines. So digital or maybe programmatic departments need to understand television much better, and television departments probably need to understand digital much better. And that starts with the measurement. So television is still very much planned, I think, based on panels and reach. But what kind of programmatic and what kind of data enables is to really plan much better in real time and optimize towards that as well. And again, connect that much better to the other channels as well. So the more TV will become digital, the bigger programmatic is going to play into that as well. And I think in the end, the more relevant experience we can deliver to the consumer, which is the most important in the end. No?
A view on how the local TV people are thinking. I'm sure you know a lot about that.
No, definitely the local TV salespeople and people that are developing content are looking on the digital space as well. But I'm very sorry that nobody from the government is here to listen how programmatic is becoming also a buying idea for the TV, and how actual this ordinance which we have right now is towards the digitalization of buying the audiences. Yeah, no, it's happening, will happen. Of course, the technology is the largest barrier, but will definitely happen in Romania as well.
Thank you. David, any views on, because the United States tends to be slightly ahead of the curve on certain topics, especially connected TVs are quite large. Can you give us some insights on your market?
Well, sure. I think it's really generational that's important. Uh, we're right to be talking about the technology and the delivery mechanisms and how we make decisions on the sort of like front end of thinking about marketing and touching people. But it's really about the consumer, as she said just a moment ago. And what we are seeing in the United States is certainly a younger population that is no longer connecting. They are no longer subscribing to cable television. They are no longer even behaving in any ways that marketers are used to using as leverage points with them. So over time, as Netflix, the actual native experience, and it's a different kind of native than native advertising, the native experience of consuming content has shifted completely. So those people whom we know we need to reach to continue to have conversations with them about our brands or anything that's of interest to us as content producers, we need to be able to be in the same places they're going to be and reach them across all the different devices and not view the device as the subject of the conversation, but rather the consumer.
Great, thank you very much. And to be honest, we're actually on time, so for a change. Does anybody from the audience have a really clever question? Or not? Okay, so it doesn't need to be that clever, but someone want to ask our experts. You won't get a chance to ask them things very often, so. Nobody? I asked all the questions, okay, thank you. All right then, thank you very much for your time. It's very much appreciated, and thank you for your views, because it's very good to see where the market is going. It will give us all an idea of what skills we personally need to develop in order to be part of this industry, and how we can, keep in pace. So thank you very much, and see you next year, hopefully.